Thanks for clicking enjoy the full story. The air smelled like salt and sunscreen, thick with the energy of thousands of people buzzing with anticipation. It was February 7, 2013, and I was standing at the dock in Galveston, Texas, staring up at the gleaming white exterior of the Carnival Triumph. It looked enormous, stretching high above us like a floating hotel. Lisa, my wife of 10 years, squeezed my hand, her eyes practically glowing with excitement. "We finally did it," she whispered, beaming. "A real vacation. For us, this was huge." Lisa and I weren't the kind of couple that splurged on extravagant getaways. Between my job as a middle school history teacher and her long shifts as a nurse at St. Luke's Hospital in Houston, money was always tight. A cruise was something we talked about but never actually went through with. But this year, we had saved, booked a balcony room, and told ourselves we deserved it. 5 days of sun, relaxation, and unlimited drinks. I took a deep breath and looked around. Families, couples, groups of college kids. Everyone was grinning, pulling along suitcases, already dressed for the tropics. Nearby, a man in a Hawaiian shirt, probably in his 50s, clapped his buddy on the back and said, "You ready for some goddamn margaritas, Dave?" His friend, a sunburnt guy in sunglasses, just laughed and nodded. As we stepped inside, the ship felt even grander. The atrium stretched high above us, lined with golden railings and glass elevators. A pianist played soft jazz on a grand piano while a bartender mixed drinks behind a long, curved bar. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter?" A Carnival employee in a red uniform smiled, checking our boarding passes. "Welcome aboard. You're in cabin 8273, just past the midship elevators." Lisa practically dragged me toward the elevators, barely containing her excitement. Our cabin was small but cozy, with a glass door leading to a private balcony. I stepped outside, leaning on the railing. The ocean stretched endlessly in front of us, waves rolling gently under the bright afternoon sun. "Not bad for a couple of budget travelers," I joked. Lisa rolled her eyes and pulled out her phone. "Let's get a selfie before my hair gets wrecked by the humidity." We spent the first night exactly as planned. We watched the sunset from our balcony, went to a fancy dinner at the Paris dining room, where our waiter, Alejandro, kept refilling my wine glass. We laughed at a live comedy show in the Rome Lounge and finally stumbled back to our room, buzzed on cocktails and the sheer joy of being somewhere that didn't involve work or responsibilities. "This is the life," Lisa murmured as she curled up against me. I couldn't have agreed more. By day 3, that feeling would be gone. I woke up groggy, Lisa still curled against my side, the soft hum of the ship vibrating beneath us. The faint scent of salt water drifted through the balcony door, left slightly open overnight. It was the kind of morning that should have felt perfect. Then the alarms started blaring. Lisa jerked awake as a voice crackled over the PA system. "Attention passengers, this is your captain speaking. We are experiencing a mechanical issue below deck. There is no immediate danger, but we ask that all guests remain in their cabins until further notice." My stomach dropped. I knew that cruise ships had their fair share of issues, but something about the captain's voice made my skin prickle. He sounded too calm, too rehearsed. Lisa sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Mechanical issue?" I reached for my phone and checked the time. 5:42 a.m. "It's probably nothing," I said, more to convince myself than her. Then the smell hit us. A sharp, acrid scent, like burning plastic. Lisa's nose wrinkled. "That's not normal," she muttered. I stepped onto the balcony, looking down toward the lower decks. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The ocean stretched out in every direction, dark and endless. Then, faintly, I saw it. A thin column of smoke curling from a vent near the ship's funnel. "Lisa," I said, backing into the cabin. "Get dressed." Now, moments later, another announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, for your safety, we are asking all guests to make their way to their muster stations. Please remain calm." Lisa and I exchanged a look. Muster stations? That was the emergency protocol. My heart started pounding. Outside, the hallway was already packed. Families clutching life vests, crew members directing people toward the stairwells. I grabbed Lisa's hand as we shuffled forward. "Do you think we should be worried?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. But deep down, I already knew. Something was very, very wrong. Everything felt surreal, like I was stuck in a waking nightmare. The news had already warned us that things were bad, really bad, but I don't think any of us truly understood what that meant. Not until the power went out. I was in the kitchen when it happened, rinsing out a half-empty bottle of water to refill from the tap, trying to conserve what we had left. The moment the lights flickered and died, my stomach dropped. At first, I thought it was just our apartment complex, maybe a local outage from the storm. But then I glanced outside. The entire skyline was dark. New York wasn't supposed to look like that. Even during blackouts, there were always scattered pockets of light. Emergency backups, generators, something. But this was total darkness. The streetlights, the billboards, the blinking lights of airplanes passing overhead, gone. A distant, panicked shouting rose from the streets below. "Jet?" My roommate, Mike, called from the living room. He was sitting on the couch, his phone's flashlight cutting a harsh beam through the dark. I swallowed hard. Yeah, the whole city's out, man. I stepped over, heart pounding, and pulled back the curtains. I could barely make out the shapes of buildings across the way. No headlights. No glowing windows. Just an eerie, unnatural blackness stretching across the city like something out of an apocalyptic movie. Mike let out a nervous laugh. Guess it finally happened? I turned to him. What do you mean? The grid. The news kept saying it was getting overloaded, that it might fail. But no one ever believes it until it does. His words sent a chill down my spine. We had been lucky so far. The hurricane had knocked out power in some boroughs, but Manhattan had stayed online. Until now. I checked my phone, 1% battery left. Crap. I rushed to the counter, yanking the charger from the wall and plugging it into my portable power bank. But when I pressed the button, nothing. The bank was dead. Mike cursed under his breath. I only got like 10% left. We had no power. No news. No way to know what was happening outside of what we could hear through the open window. And the sounds weren't good. A woman screaming. A loud crash, like glass shattering. Someone shouting for help. And then the sirens. I exchanged a look with Mike. He was pale in the dim glow of his phone, his usual laid-back demeanor cracking under the weight of the situation. We should stay inside, I muttered. Yeah, he agreed, but I could tell he was just as uneasy as I was. Then the knocking started. It was frantic, 3 sharp raps against the door, followed by silence. Mike and I both froze. We weren't expecting anyone. And in a city plunged into sudden darkness, unexpected visitors weren't a good thing. My throat felt dry. Who is it? No answer. Another knock. Mike grabbed a baseball bat from the corner, one he usually kept as a joke, but now gripped like it was a lifeline. I moved cautiously toward the door, pressing my eye against the peephole. A shadowy figure stood in the hallway. A familiar figure. I exhaled in relief and yanked the door open. Jesus, Erica, you scared the hell out of me. Erica Bennett, our neighbor from 2 doors down, practically fell inside. Her curly brown hair was drenched, her face streaked with rain and exhaustion. She was panting, eyes wild. You guys still have power? She asked breathlessly. Mike and I exchanged a glance. No, I said. Whole city's out. She swore under her breath and rubbed her arms. I just ran from my place. Some guy was banging on my door. Heart. I didn't answer, but I think he tried to break in. My stomach turned. Did you see his face? She shook her head. Too dark. But I wasn't gonna wait around to find out. A gust of wind howled outside, rattling the windows. The storm wasn't even over, and already, the city was unraveling. I shut the door and locked it. You can stay here, I told her. At least until morning. She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. Thanks. The 3 of us sat in tense silence, listening to the sounds of a city slipping into chaos. And that was the moment I knew, this blackout wasn't going to be over in a few hours. This was just the beginning. The smell of saltwater and the faint scent of burning plastic still hung in the air as Lisa and I stood in the dimly lit corridor. The lights had flickered out minutes ago, leaving us with only the emergency lights to guide our way. My heart was pounding in my chest. The ship, once a beacon of relaxation and luxury, now felt like a prison. The panic that had been simmering beneath the surface was now starting to bubble over. I looked around at the people surrounding us. Some were still trying to make sense of the situation, while others were already pushing toward the nearest stairwell, eager to reach the lifeboats. The crew members, usually so composed and friendly, now wore worried expressions, their movements hurried and uncoordinated. No one knew what was really happening, and that uncertainty was the most terrifying thing of all. We need to stay together, I said to Lisa, gripping her hand tightly. Keep calm. We'll figure this out. Lisa nodded, though I could see the fear in her eyes. Her lips trembled as she tried to hold back tears, but she squeezed my hand in return, finding strength in my grip. Do you think they're hiding something? She whispered. I don't know, I said, my mind racing. But we need to get to the bridge. We need to find out what's really going on. We moved quickly through the hallways, dodging groups of passengers and crew members who were directing people toward their muster stations. The usual sounds of the ship, the hum of the engines, the laughter of passengers in the lounges, were gone. All we could hear now was the distant wail of the emergency alarms and the muffled conversations of frightened people. As we approached a crew-only stairwell, a young man in a uniform stepped forward. He was panting, his face pale and strained. His eyes darted nervously around the hallway before he spoke. They're not telling us everything, he said in a low voice. People are starting to panic. They don't know what's wrong with the ship. Where are they taking the passengers? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Some are being moved to the lifeboats, he said, glancing over his shoulder again. But they're trying to maintain order. We don't know if we can fix it. The power's out in some parts of the ship, and there's a smell of smoke. It's bad. I felt my stomach tighten at his words. Smoke? That couldn't be good. Before I could ask any more questions, another voice cut through the air. Sir, you need to stay back. A crew member in a red uniform appeared, blocking our path. There's an emergency. Please move back to your cabin immediately. No, we're not going back to our cabin, I said firmly. We need to get to the bridge. We need to understand what's happening. The crew member hesitated, then seemed to weigh his options before stepping aside. Fine, he muttered. But you didn't hear this from me. The captain's being tight-lipped about the whole situation, but things aren't looking good. You didn't hear it from me. We didn't need any more convincing. We sprinted up the stairwell, our footsteps echoing in the silence, until we reached the hallway leading to the bridge. The door was locked. I knocked frantically, trying to stay calm, but no one answered. Behind us, the faint sounds of shouting passengers grew louder. A group of frightened people was making their way toward us, looking to escape the panic. We need to get inside, I said, my voice urgent. Lisa grabbed my arm. Wait, maybe we should go to the lifeboats. If the captain's not answering, it might be worse than we think. We can't just sit and wait, I said, my heart racing. I'm not leaving until I know what's going on. I reached for the doorknob and turned it, pushing hard. To my surprise, it opened. Inside, the bridge was in chaos. Crew members were speaking in hushed voices, their eyes darting nervously between control panels and each other. One of them, a man with dark circles under his eyes, turned to face us. You shouldn't be here, he said sharply, clearly surprised. We need answers, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the overwhelming sense of urgency. What's happening? Why is the power out? Why are people being evacuated? The man sighed, running a hand through his hair. We're dealing with a mechanical failure. The engines are offline, and the power's not coming back on as quickly as we thought. We've got emergency generators running, but they're not enough. The smell of smoke is from an electrical short in one of the lower decks. We've contained it for now, but it's not under control. I swallowed hard. So, we're stuck. Not stuck, he corrected. We're still moving slowly. We've called for assistance. There's a ship on its way, but it'll take hours. And until then, we're doing everything we can to keep people calm and ensure everyone's safety. I nodded slowly, trying to process the information. The uncertainty of it all still weighed heavily on me. Can you guarantee our safety? I asked, my voice almost a whisper. The man looked at me with tired eyes. I can't make promises, but we're doing everything we can. Just then an officer entered, her face grim. We need to move everyone to the lower deck. The captain's giving the order. The lower deck? I repeated, confused. The muster stations are safer down there, she said, her tone clipped. We need everyone to stay calm and follow the protocol. I exchanged a look with Lisa. This wasn't what I'd expected, but it was clear the situation was far worse than we'd been told. All right, I said, my voice firm. We're going to stick together. We'll follow the orders. The officer nodded and turned away, leaving us with more questions than answers. The bridge was still buzzing with activity, but the lack of answers was starting to feel suffocating. As we made our way back to the muster station, the weight of it all sank in. People were still looking for answers, and the anxiety in the air was palpable. But in the midst of it all, I realized one thing. We were all in this together. And whatever happened next, we had to rely on each other. The air was thick with tension as we made our way back to the muster station. The emergency lighting flickered as we passed more confused and frightened passengers, their faces pale, their movements erratic. Some were trying to calm their kids, others clutched life vests to their chests as if they might suddenly need them. The ship's familiar, comforting hum was now just an eerie reminder of how out of control things had become. Lisa squeezed my hand tighter, her grip shaky, but she didn't say anything. I could feel her fear, but I also knew she was trying to stay strong for both of us. We needed each other right now. We reached the muster station where a group of passengers had already gathered. Most were sitting on the floor, muttering to themselves or trying to contact loved ones on their phones, though I saw many of them had little to no signal. A few crew members were attempting to keep order, though their own anxiety was starting to show. A tall crew member, a woman with dark, braided hair, stood at the front, her voice steady but strained. Please, everyone stay calm, she said, though it was clear she was struggling to maintain control. We are working to restore power, and assistance is on the way. Everyone will be evacuated safely if necessary. We're in constant contact with other vessels in the area. I exchanged a quick glance with Lisa. The words sounded reassuring, but her worried expression told me she wasn't buying it. I wasn't sure I was either. This didn't feel like a standard mechanical issue. The strange smell, the lack of real information, it all pointed to something worse. We sat down among the others, trying to settle in. The minutes passed slowly, with no sign of the promised assistance or any real answers. The passengers were starting to get restless. Murmurs filled the room, followed by the occasional outburst as people's patience wore thin. I kept looking around, trying to figure out if anyone knew anything more. A middle-aged couple to my right was arguing in low voices. The man seemed furious, gesturing toward a crew member who was trying to speak to a group of concerned passengers. This is a joke, he snapped. They're not telling us anything. How long are we supposed to sit here waiting? I'm sure they're doing everything they can, the woman beside him said, trying to calm him down. But it was clear both of them were growing more and more impatient. Suddenly, a young crew member, looking pale and wide-eyed, approached the front of the room. He cleared his throat, trying to gain the attention of the group. Everyone, he said, his voice wavering, we just got word. There's been an issue on one of the lower decks. We don't know the full extent, but the fire is more serious than we thought. A collective gasp spread through the room. Lisa's grip on my hand tightened. A fire, she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I could see the fear in everyone's eyes, the realization that things were spiraling. A fire below deck. Smoke filling the air. What else were they hiding? Before I could respond, another voice, this one much sharper and more authoritative, cut through the murmurs. Listen up. It was the crew member with the dark braids again. We are evacuating the lower decks. We need you to follow orders and stay in place for now. There is no immediate threat, but we need to keep everything organized. I could tell she was doing her best to maintain control, but the uncertainty was palpable. No one really knew what was happening. Stay calm, she repeated, though her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Help is on the way. We're in direct communication with the Coast Guard, and they're sending a ship to us right now. I turned back to Lisa. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with worry. Do you think they're telling us everything? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head. No, I said quietly, the weight of the situation sinking in. But I don't think we have a choice. We need to stay calm and wait. We'll get through this together. But even as I said the words, I wasn't so sure anymore. The hours dragged on. Lisa and I stayed in the muster station, trying to stay as calm as possible while the ship seemed to come alive with whispers and frantic chatter. Crew members came and went, some bringing brief updates, but they were all vague and contradictory. The captain still hadn't spoken to the passengers directly, and there was no indication of when the assistance would arrive. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety, but amidst the chaos, a strange thing happened. People started talking to each other. A young couple in their 20s shared their travel snacks with an elderly woman sitting across from them. A father with 2 young children passed around a pack of crackers to the families nearby. The passengers, though clearly scared, were beginning to rely on each other. I caught a glimpse of Erica, our neighbor from a few doors down, sitting in the corner. She was staring off into space, her face pale, but she managed a small smile when our eyes met. I walked over to her, trying to offer some comfort. "You doing okay?" I asked softly. She nodded, though it was clear she wasn't entirely convinced. "I guess," she said. I don't know what to think anymore." "We're all in the same boat," I said with a weak smile, trying to lighten the mood, though I knew it wasn't really working. "But we'll get through this. They wouldn't leave us out here if it was really that bad." Erica gave me a small, grateful smile, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The room grew quieter as the minutes stretched on. People were starting to tire from sitting, their nerves on edge. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed from the doorway. Everyone turned their heads, tension rising in the room. A crew member stepped inside, looking pale and out of breath. "Attention, everyone," he said in a shaky voice. "We have some good news. The fire on the lower deck is under control. The Coast Guard has arrived and is directing us to evacuate. We will be loading passengers onto lifeboats shortly." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. But even as we breathed a little easier, I knew this wasn't over. We still had to get off the ship, still had to make sure everyone made it out safely. Lisa grabbed my hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're really going to make it, aren't we?" I nodded, squeezing her hand tight. "We are. We'll make it." The chaos of the evacuation started almost immediately, but there was an undeniable sense of unity now. The passengers, who had been so anxious and scared just hours before, were now working together. Crew members directed people to lifeboats, and the captain finally made an announcement over the PA, offering a brief but heartfelt thanks to the passengers for their patience and cooperation. As we climbed into a lifeboat, the Carnival Triumph slowly started to drift into the distance, the ship's towering structure now a shadow on the horizon. The sun was starting to set, casting a pale orange glow over the water. The worst was over, but it was a long time before I could truly breathe easy again. For now we were safe. And together we had made it through.